Hey BookTube, this is Friday Reads.
I got my ticket for the long way round.
You know, recently I have noticed that many of the people that I watch on YouTube, which by the way, a lot of them don't even read the same stuff I do. I just love their personalities. I love getting to know them. But they have tended to morph their Friday Reads into less of a here's what I'm reading in the next couple of days and more into here's a recap of what I read last week and here's what's ahead of me. So I thought I would try that format, and if it works for me, great, I'll keep it up, and if not, then I will just go back to my old way of doing it. So let me tell you what I read last week. I finished 5 books, which sounds like a lot, except that I had started a lot of them early on. So I'm going to start with Z for Zachariah. This is by Robert C. O'Brien, and it is narrated on audio by Christina Moore. I saw that there was a movie that had come out by this name, and it's not, it didn't come out in theaters, I don't think, or if it did, it was a very limited release. But the reason I noticed it was because Chris Pine is in it. Ah, be still my heart. So when I saw that there was a book out, I wanted to read it. And I don't often do that, read the book before seeing the movie, but in this case I thought it might be good because the movie apparently is an adaptation that has added a character and the plot is a little bit different, so I wanted to read the book, so I did. It is a post-apocalyptic story about Anne Burden, who is the lone survivor of a war that pretty much decimated the whole population. Nerve gas was used, and so people died of that rather than a nuclear fallout. And her little valley was protected. She's a farm girl. She knows how to do all kinds of stuff. She's very capable of living in the woods on her own or living on her own in general, and she still lives on the farm. Her family went to town one day and never came back. So it's told from her perspective in diary format, and it's essentially what happens when Mr. Loomis arrives in a hazmat suit into her valley and her relationship with him that follows. The ending seems kind of abrupt, but that's appropriate, I thought, because of the way it's written in diary format. She just didn't continue with the diary. It's like you turn that page and then, you don't know what happens afterward. But it's at an appropriate time in the story, so I liked it. I gave it 4 stars, and I'm anxious now to see the movie. Overseas, this is by Beatriz Williams, and it is narrated on audio by January LaVoy, who I love. She did a fabulous job. She was very appropriate for each character. Her ranges, which distinguished each character, were wonderful, and I loved the emotion and the life that she brought to them. I really enjoyed her narration. I think it made the book all the better. Now, one thing I do when I listen is I set the timer on my iPod and then I end up falling asleep. I listen to it as I fall asleep. So very often I will fall asleep before the timer goes off and turns off my iPod. So then I have to backtrack and find out what was the last thing I remember hearing about. Well, with the book, it's so nice because you can go back and read rather than having to rewind the iPod. So I picked this up at a thrift store at one point, and it was in beautiful condition, so I was really glad to have it so I could refer back to it. This is a time travel story and a little bit of historical fiction in that the 2 characters are separated in time. Julian is a guy who is in the British Army in Paris during World War I, and he time travels to the present day and ends up meeting Kate in 2007. She is a person who works on Wall Street in the financial world, and he has been in the financial world since he time traveled, which has been, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years. So he's very wealthy, and he is a big player, and she meets him through the course of the financial dealings with her company. And then some things happen, and then the book kind of falls into a romance that it can't ever climb out of. There is a little bit of intrigue going on, and that makes it interesting. But for a romance lover like me, this was kind of a lot. It was kind of a lot. So I liked it a lot. I gave it 3 stars, and I would recommend it if you like time travel or just romantic historical fiction with a little bit of a twist thrown in. I continued on with the Animal Magnetism series by Jill Shalvis. Oh, love Jill Shalvis. With books 3 and 4. These are both narrated by Karen White, who is narrating the entire series. I love Karen White. I have gotten acquainted with her on Twitter, and I think it's wonderful. I really love her narration. She is perfect for this series, and I love that whatever I'm going to listen to, I can depend on it being great because she's doing it. And like I have said before in wrap-ups, she switches it up just a hair so that they don't all sound the same. Book 3 is called Rescue My Heart. Book 4 is Rumor Has It, and I gave that one 3 stars. I gave Rescue My Heart 4 stars. And the last book I finished last week was The Revolution of Ivy by Amy Engel. On audio, it's narrated by Taylor Meskimen, but it came out on November 3rd, and at the time that I read it, it wasn't out yet. So I listened to the Book of Ivy, which it's a duology. So I listened to the Book of Ivy on audio to refresh my memory, and then I started this on my iPad as an ARC at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I finished it at 5. A lot of you asked me what book was that you did that with, but that was the book. And I want to do a full review on the duology, and 5 stars. Fabulous, fabulous series. Really loved it. It's a dystopian, it's YA, and it's written amazingly well, and I loved it. And this week I am going to start by finishing up Changeless by Gail Carriger. This is book 2 in the Parasol Protectorate series. It's narrated on audio by Emily Gray, and she's fabulous, fabulous for this series. She narrates all the books in the series. This is what my friend Patty calls a fantasy of manners. It's set around the turn of the early 20th century, and it is in a paranormal London where there are werewolves and vampires and ghosts and other sorts of creatures. And Alexia Terabody is the main character, and she is a wonderful lead character. The whole thing is so well written, and the most enjoyable thing about it is the language of the time period. So it's very clever, very witty. You really have to be in the mood for it, but boy, when you are, it is such a pleasure. So I'm going to finish that up, and I'm also reading Tales of the Madman Underground by John Barnes. I picked this up because I'm going to see The Kid later this week. I'm making one of my quarterly trips down to see my kids, and I wanted to have it read by the time I saw her. This is her book. She picked it up and kind of half destroyed it, but she didn't care. And I've marked it, which I never do, but there are so many things in this book that are so good, so many great lines. I'm about halfway through it, and I will tell you about it further in a wrap-up, but suffice it to say that it is written about a guy. It's a little slice of life. It's the first 7 days of his senior year of high school in 1973 in a small town in Ohio. So at the time of the book, I would have been a freshman in high school in a small town in Ohio. So I am thoroughly enjoying it. He's so clever and hilariously funny, and the Madman Underground refers to a therapy group of kids that get pulled out of class for an hour, and they've all got some kind of an issue that they're dealing with, like a bad home life or something traumatic has happened. Something's happened for a teacher to recommend that they get pulled out, and so it's their little group and the story of how they protect each other and their relationships. Further on in the week, because I have that big long drive, I'm going to knock a couple of things off my TBR, the first of which is The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender. This is by Leslye Walton, and it is narrated on audio by Cassandra Campbell, who is a good narrator. I've listened to things by her before, and I know I'm going to love that. And I'm also going to get to November 9 by Colleen Hoover. It's her latest book. I love this author. It's narrated on audio by Zachary Weber and Angela Goethals, who I have listened to before and I love. Zachary Weber is one of my favorite narrators. And I'm so excited because on November 10th, which is release day for the book, I get to go to a signing and have Colleen Hoover sign that book. So I can't wait. I can get my book signed and then I can listen to it on my long drive. So that is last week and this coming week and this weekend. And, you know, I always want to know what you're reading this weekend. So let me know. Let's talk about that in comments. Also, let me know if you've read any of these books, what your thoughts were. And that's it for now for me. I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.
When I'm gone. You're gonna miss me when I'm gone. You're gonna miss me by my walk. You're gonna miss me by my talk. Oh, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone.